Stop for a second and pay attention to the back of your throat right now. Go ahead, swallow. Is there a thickness sitting there that just won't lift no matter how many times you clear it this morning? If you're nodding right now, I want you to think about something. Can you remember the exact day this started? Most people can't. It doesn't arrive all at once. It starts as a once-a-week annoyance, then it's every morning, then somewhere along the way it just becomes part of who you are. You keep water nearby out of habit. You've quietly given up certain foods. You've probably tried 2 or 3 things a friend or a family member swore by. Here's what I want you to really sit with. That mucus isn't random, and it isn't simply getting older. Your body doesn't waste energy producing symptoms for no reason. Every lingering symptom is a message, and today I'm going to translate it for you. I'm Dr. David Aid, and I spend my time helping people understand what their bodies are actually trying to tell them, especially when it comes to the slow, quiet changes that come with age. And in years of looking at this exact complaint, persistent throat mucus, I've noticed it gets mismanaged more than almost anything else I see. People get handed lozenges. They're told to drink more fluids and sent on their way. And the real driver underneath it all almost never gets named. That changes today. I'm going to walk you through 5 separate, well-documented reasons this happens to adults over 55. And more importantly, I'm going to show you which 2 of these tend to show up together. Because when they do, your symptoms get noticeably worse. Before we go further, answer me this in the comments. Is your throat worse the moment you wake up, or does it bother you steadily all day long? Just type morning or all day. That single answer tells me a lot about which direction your body is leaning, and I'll come back to it. Let's get into it, starting with something almost nobody explains properly. Your body makes mucus every hour of every day, and that is completely normal. It's not a flaw, it's a defense. Mucus is the protective film lining your airway, trapping bacteria, dust, and viral particles before they ever reach deeper into your lungs. It also keeps the delicate tissue of your throat from drying out and cracking. So the issue was never that your body produces mucus. The issue is what happens to it as the decades go by. Here's the part almost nobody is told in a regular doctor's appointment. Lining your airway are millions of microscopic hair-like structures called cilia. Their entire job is to sweep mucus upward and out continuously, so it never has the chance to sit and thicken. In a 30-year-old, this conveyor belt runs fast and efficient. Mucus is produced and cleared almost as quickly as it forms, but research on respiratory aging tells us plainly that this ciliary motion slows down with age. The beat frequency drops, and what would have cleared in seconds at 40 can now sit and accumulate for hours at 65 or 70. That single fact is the reason every cause I'm about to walk you through hits harder and lasts longer in this stage of life than it would have 20 years ago. With that foundation in place, let's get into the 5 causes, because a couple of these tend to stack on each other in ways that make everything worse. The first cause is, in my experience, the one that gets missed more than any other in this age group. It's called laryngopharyngeal reflux, and most people have simply never heard the term. You already know what classic heartburn feels like, that burning sensation behind the breastbone after a heavy meal. But there's a quieter cousin of that condition. No burning, no obvious stomach discomfort. Just a throat that refuses to settle. Here's the mechanism. Where your esophagus meets your stomach, there's a muscular ring whose only job is to stay shut after eating, sealing acid away where it belongs. With age, that ring can lose tone, the way a rubber band loses its snap after years of stretching. When it doesn't seal completely, stomach acid can travel upward, not just into the esophagus, but all the way to the throat and voice box, sometimes even into the nasal passages. The throat tissue isn't built to tolerate acid the way the esophagus is, so even a trace amount reaching it triggers an immediate defensive response. Your body floods the area with thick, protective mucus, completely logical biology. But if this is happening quietly while you sleep, night after night, you wake up to that same heavy coating every single morning, with no obvious reason why, because there was never any burning to clue you in. Clinical literature on this condition is striking. A large share of patients with confirmed silent reflux report no heartburn whatsoever, just chronic throat clearing and a voice that sounds rough first thing in the morning. So ask yourself honestly, is your throat noticeably worse before breakfast than it is by mid-afternoon. Does bending forward make it worse? Has your voice sounded different right after waking? Those are the signature clues of silent reflux, and I'll give you a concrete first step for it in the action plan. One more detail worth flagging. If you take anti-inflammatory medication regularly for joint pain, ibuprofen or naproxen for example, that class of drug is known to weaken the stomach's natural protective lining, which makes acid reflux, including this silent form, more likely. If that applies to you and your throat has been bothering you, it's worth mentioning specifically to your doctor. Tell me your name and where you're watching from in the comments. I read through them, and I like knowing exactly who's on the other side of this conversation. The second cause tends to hide because it doesn't look the way people expect sinus trouble to look. Most of us picture the dramatic version: a throbbing face, a fully blocked nose, the kind of sinus infection that announces itself. But in a lot of adults past their mid-50s, sinus inflammation runs quietly in the background. Breathing feels mostly normal. There's no real headache, and yet the sinuses are mildly swollen, producing a bit more mucus than usual, and steadily draining down the back of the throat all day. That's postnasal drip, and it's notably common in exactly this age range. A frustrating pattern I see often. People reach for an over-the-counter antihistamine, assuming it's seasonal allergies, and stay on it for months with disappointing results. There's a reason for that. Antihistamines dry up mucus temporarily, but they do nothing for the underlying swelling inside the sinuses that's generating the extra mucus in the first place. And thickened, dried mucus sitting at the back of the throat is often more uncomfortable than the wet version was. The strategy with the strongest, most consistent backing here is simple and inexpensive: regular nasal rinsing with warm saline. Reviews of sinonasal treatment options consistently describe nasal irrigation as a safe, low-cost, effective approach for both treating and preventing upper respiratory issues, and it's widely recommended by ENT specialists as a supporting treatment alongside other care. High-volume saline rinsing physically flushes out inflammatory mucus, eases the swelling in the lining of the sinuses, and helps restore the natural sweeping action of those cilia we talked about earlier, the very system that slows down with age. The key word is consistency. Doing it once or twice gives you a day or two of relief. Doing it daily, correctly, produces a real cumulative change. I'll walk through the exact method shortly. If this is resonating, drop a 2 in the comments so I know you're still with me. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel keep producing content like this. Where are you watching this from? I would love to hear from you. This third cause is the one that catches people most off guard because the medication responsible is usually something they've taken faithfully for years without ever questioning it. There's a category of blood pressure medication called ACE inhibitors, short for angiotensin-converting enzyme inhibitors. They're prescribed constantly, they work well, and they serve a genuinely important purpose for cardiovascular health. But this class of drug carries a well-documented class-wide side effect. It allows a compound called bradykinin to build up in the body, and in a meaningful minority of users, somewhere in the range of 5 to 20% depending on the study, that buildup triggers ongoing throat irritation and a near-constant urge to clear it. This isn't an allergic reaction, and it isn't anything unusual happening in your body. It's simply how the medication works, and your throat happens to be sensitive to that particular effect. Here's why the connection so often goes unnoticed. This side effect can take weeks, sometimes months, to appear after you start the medication. If you began a blood pressure prescription 8 months ago and your throat started acting up 6 months ago, you may never have linked the two events, even though that delayed timing is exactly the pattern described in the research on this drug class. Studies looking at this side effect have also found that older adults experience it notably more often than younger patients do. If you're on a blood pressure medication and you're not sure which category it falls into, your pharmacist can tell you in under a minute. And if it does turn out to be an ACE inhibitor, there's another category, ARBs, or angiotensin receptor blockers, that controls blood pressure just as effectively without this particular side effect. That's a conversation worth having with your prescribing doctor, not a reason to stop any medication on your own. If you're still with me, type clarity in the comments, because that's exactly what today is about. The fourth cause gets dismissed by a lot of people as too obvious to be the real answer. It's hydration. But stay with me, because the physiology here is more specific than just drink more water. Mucus is mostly water, and its texture, Whether it moves easily or sits thick and sticky depends directly on how hydrated the surrounding tissue is. Picture maple syrup straight from a sealed bottle versus syrup that's been left open on the counter overnight. Same substance, completely different behavior. Your mucus responds to your hydration status in much the same way. Here's the age-specific wrinkle that makes this more than a generic reminder. The thirst response itself becomes less reliable as we get older. A younger adult feels thirsty well before they're meaningfully dehydrated. In older adults, that early warning signal is blunted, which means you can be dehydrated enough to thicken your mucus and affect your comfort without ever feeling particularly thirsty. If you're waiting for thirst to tell you to drink, you're consistently running a step behind. A practical target referenced often in clinical nutrition guidance is roughly 30 milliliters of fluid per kilogram of body weight per day, counting water, herbal tea, soup, and water-rich foods. But the real key is steady, deliberate intake throughout the day, not catching up after the fact. If this is landing, type 4 in the comments, and if you haven't subscribed yet, this is a good moment to do it. The fifth cause is the one that gets the least airtime in videos like this one, and I think that's a real gap, because for a meaningful number of older adults, the root of persistent throat mucus isn't in the throat, the sinuses, or even the stomach. It's in the gut. Your digestive tract and your respiratory system are more connected than most people realize, sharing regulatory signals through both the immune system and the nervous system. The state of your gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria living in your intestines, has a measurable influence on how reactive and inflamed your upper airways become. When that microbial balance is disrupted, a state researchers call dysbiosis, it can switch on immune responses that drive excess mucus production in the airway, not because anything is physically wrong with your throat, but because your gut is sending inflammatory signals your respiratory system is responding to. This relationship, often called the gut-lung axis, is an active area of ongoing clinical research, with studies appearing in respected respiratory and immunology journals linking gut microbiome disruption to airway inflammation. Animal research has gone a step further, showing that transferring gut bacteria from subjects with chronic lung conditions into healthy subjects measurably increased airway mucus production in the recipients, pointing to a real, direct relationship rather than a loose correlation. What disrupts the gut microbiome over the years? A diet low in fiber and fermented foods, repeated rounds of antibiotics over a lifetime, high sugar intake, and chronic stress. None of that is exotic. It describes daily life for a huge number of people in this age group. You won't fix a gut airway problem with a throat lozenge, but you can start supporting your gut, and I'll show you exactly how in a moment. Before I hand you the action plan, I need to pause on something important. In the vast majority of cases, persistent throat mucus in adults over 55 is exactly what we've discussed today. Manageable, explainable, and not dangerous. But your body sometimes uses a symptom to flag something that needs a professional, not a home routine. Please book an appointment promptly if you notice mucus that's tinged with blood, even slightly, difficulty swallowing that's getting worse over time, unexplained weight loss alongside the throat symptoms, a lump or persistent swelling in your neck, or a voice change that isn't improving. None of those fall under today's conversation, and they deserve a doctor's attention, not a wait-and-see approach. Now let's turn everything we've covered into something you can actually act on. Tonight, stop eating at least 3 hours before lying down. When you eat and then recline right away, your stomach is still working and that valve we discussed has its hardest time staying shut. 3 hours of upright time afterward is one of the most consistently supported steps for reducing nighttime silent reflux. Raise the head of your bed slightly, not with extra pillows under your head, which just bends your neck uncomfortably, but with a wedge under the mattress or headboard legs. Even a small incline lets gravity work in your favor overnight. Before bed tonight, drink a full glass of warm water. It supports overnight hydration and helps keep mucus thinner, so the morning buildup is less intense. Tomorrow morning, before coffee, before breakfast, drink 1 or 2 glasses of plain warm water. This single habit costs nothing, starts rehydrating your body immediately, and loosens the overnight mucus buildup before it takes over your morning. It's consistently one of the most impactful small changes people report. This week, pick up a nasal rinsing kit from the pharmacy, either a neti pot or a squeeze bottle. Use water that's been boiled and cooled to a comfortable warmth, never straight from the tap. Add a small pinch of plain salt, and if you'd like, a very small pinch of baking soda, which may help thin the mucus. Use it once a day, ideally in the morning, and give it 2 full weeks before judging whether it's working. Consistency is what separates the people who feel real relief from the people who give up too early. Book an appointment specifically to review your medication list against your throat symptoms. Bring a written timeline, when the throat symptoms started, and when you last started or changed a medication. If you take a blood pressure medication, ask directly whether it's an ACE inhibitor and whether an ARB might be a reasonable alternative for you. To support the gut-airway connection, add 1 small daily serving of a fermented food, plain yogurt with live cultures, kefir, a bit of kimchi or sauerkraut. This is a long-term strategy, not an overnight fix, but those are the strategies that actually shift your baseline over time. Set reminders to drink water throughout the day. Keep it within reach in every room, and add water-rich foods like cucumber, watermelon, and soup to your routine. A quick word on common home remedies, since I know many of you have tried a few. Honey genuinely soothes irritated throat tissue and can ease symptoms temporarily, though it doesn't address any of the 5 root causes we covered. Dairy doesn't manufacture mucus out of nothing. The science doesn't support that claim, though some people notice it makes existing mucus feel thicker. If that sounds familiar, a 2 to 3 week trial without it is reasonable. Apple cider vinegar is popular online, but if silent reflux is part of your picture, adding more acid can make things worse, so be cautious there. Here's what I want you to leave with today. That coating at the back of your throat has a reason. 5 possible reasons, in fact. And most people living with this have never had a single one properly explained to them. Silent reflux working quietly while you sleep with no heartburn to warn you. Postnasal drip from low-grade sinus inflammation that never announces itself. Medication-related irritation from ACE inhibitors that can take months to surface and rarely gets connected to the prescription itself. Hidden dehydration running just below the level that makes you feel thirsty, and a gut microbiome sending inflammatory signals your airways are picking up on. None of these mean you're simply destined to live with constant throat clearing. Each one has a practical, well-supported response, and none of the first steps require a prescription. They require a bit of knowledge, some consistency, and a willingness to treat this symptom as information rather than a nuisance. If anyone has ever told you this is just what getting older feels like, I hope today gave you a clearer picture, because there is real, identifiable physiology behind this, and you deserve to understand it. If this video helped you make sense of something you've been dealing with quietly, give it a like. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need to hear it. Subscribe and turn on notifications because I have more videos coming on how gut health connects to the inflammation patterns I see most often in this age group. And if you know someone who's been dealing with this same throat issue for months without an answer, send them this video. It might be exactly what they needed. Before you go, tell me in the comments which of these 5 causes surprised you the most and how long you've been dealing with this. I read every comment. Take care of yourself.